Today, let's talk about adding some spice to a melody. Hey, I'm Schanno Johnson. If you don't know me, I'm a musician, composer, producer, and I make videos about all that fun stuff. Music composition, music production. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. Something I think about when writing melodies is I think about how colorful or like spicy they are. Mainly what I mean by this is how many tensions do they outline over a chord, or how often do they land on a note that's either the 7th, 9th, 13th, or 11th, sharp 11th, or something of a chord. And we can use this sort of thinking this way about our melodies to, pun intended, spice up our melodies. We can also just use it to sort of get out of writing melodies that all sound the same and all end up kind of sounding bland, if that is something that happens, which can happen if you write melodies in the exact same way and always use the exact same ideas when writing your melodies. Okay, so let's talk about what I mean by spice or color in a melody. The first thing we're going to have to learn is what tensions are. And hopefully you know your triads and your seventh chords and everything, because that will be super, super useful. But a seventh chord has 4 tones in it. You have the root, the third, the fifth, and the seventh. Those are all just named the number scale degree that you have, right? The root is the first scale degree, the third is the third scale degree, the fifth is the fifth scale degree, and the seventh is, well, of course, it's the 7th scale degree. So if we build a C major chord, I like using C major just because it's easy to think about. It's all white keys. So if we build a C major 7 chord with a C major scale, we get the notes C, E, G, and B. Those are our root, third, fifth, and 7th, respectively. Now, what if we wanted to add other notes to this chord? You could add a D or an A, or you could add an F if you want to. In some contexts, it might not sound great, but you could add these notes. But what do we call those notes? We don't just call them the 2nd and the 6th and the 4th unless we don't have one of the other notes. So if we're adding it on top of a 7th chord, we have all the other notes. If we have a D and an E in a C major chord, then we can't call it the 2nd. Same thing goes for F, the 4th. If we have an F and an E, we can't call it just the 4th because there is a different type of chord. Quick little thing, they're called suspended chords, and it's when you don't have the third. So if you have the 2nd in a scale and the root and the 5th but no third, it's called a suspended 2nd. And if you have the 4th but no third and you have the 5th and the root, it's called a suspended 4th. So sus4, sus2. Insert sus joke. Okay, so if we make these chords, these 7th chords, we have C, E, G, and B, and then we add a D on top of it, we have to go up. For some reason, this is how they're titled in music theory, so bear with me. It does make a little sense what you get used to it, but if you add a D to a 7th chord, like C major 7, you have C, E, G, B, and then D. Instead of calling it the 2nd, you count up the scale and you keep going. So the reasoning for this, as I understand it, is that you are counting up by thirds, in like you're stacking thirds within this scale. So if we keep that scale going, right, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and D again. Rather than calling it the 2nd, because we've passed an octave, we call it the 9th, right? Because we would count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 9th scale degree would be D. And this is how tensions continue. So if we continue past D to E, we have a 10th. It's not a tension, but that's, I guess, what it would be, that interval, right? If we went up again, that would be the 11th rather than the 4th for F. We keep going. We have a 12th. That would be G. That would be the 5th scale degree. If we go one more at past 12, past G to A, we would have a 13th. This does get a little complicated, but as long as you know your scale and you remember the numbers for the different scale degrees, it's pretty easy once you get used to it. Quick aside, this can also help you in reading chord symbols if you play like jazz or fusion or funk or soul music or something like that, right? If you see a C major 9 chord, it's a C major 7 with a 9. Same thing with if you have a C minor 11 chord, that's a C minor 7 with 9 and 11. You keep going up to that whatever scale degree or tension you have in the chord name. Now, C13, C9 without having major or minor in the middle does get a little more complicated. Those are just dominant 7 chords though. C9 would be a C7 chord, C, E, G, B flat with D at the top, that's the 9. C13 would be the same thing except you have 9 and 13. To get into some real quick theory about tensions real quick, a lot of tensions that are used commonly are a whole step above a chord tone. In the case of a 9, that's a whole step above the root. A 13 is a whole step above the 5th. And the same thing for a sharp 11, that's a whole step above the 3rd. In this case, for C major, that would be an F sharp. Hopefully all of that is starting to make some sense, okay? Instead of just doing chord tones, C, E, G, B, you could land on tensions like D, F sharp, and A, which are the 9, sharp 11, and 13th respectively of this chord. Hopefully that's starting to make a little sense. It is kind of a little complicated. It gets a little more complicated with minor and dominant 7 chords, but for now, let's just focus on 9 and 13, maybe sharp 11 a little bit. Okay, so how can we use this in our melody writing if we want to add some spice? Well, one thing you could do is just literally substitute these tensions instead of chord tones. So you write a melody as you normally would, and rather than landing on a 3rd, you land on the 9th or the sharp 11th or the 11th. And rather than landing on the 5th, you land on the 13 or flat 13, I guess, if you want to be really spicy. And rather than landing on the root, you either land on the 7th or the 9th. And it's sort of an easy way to add some color into your melodies without sort of having to think about it. I know that sounds kind of silly, but when you do this with your melodies, you can sort of sneak in a little bit of color into your melodies and make it sound a little bit more colorful and a little spicier depending on what tensions you use, rather than having to think about all of these things at the same time. Once you get used to doing this, sort of substituting out 9ths and 13ths and stuff like that, or 3rds and 5ths or roots and 5ths or whatever for the 9 or 13, you could experiment with 11ths or sharp 11ths or flat 13s or flat or sharp 9s depending on what you want to do. I will say those tensions are going to be much spicier. They're going to add a little bit more dissonance to whatever you're playing, because especially flat 9ths, sharp 9ths, and flat 13ths, those are going to add a lot of spice to what you're doing because they're either a half step or a whole step above or below a chord tone. So a flat 9 is a half step above the root, a flat 13 is a half step above the 5th, and a sharp 9 is a half step above the 9th or a half step below a major 3rd. It's used on dominant 7th chords most often. So if you have a dominant 7 chord, C, E, G, and B flat, a sharp 9 would be an E flat on top of that. So you can use it as a blue note a lot. That's super, super common. But if you land on it and hold it and don't resolve it, or you put it into the chord, right? So it's a C7 sharp 9, that would then add some extra spice to it as well. Another thing that you can do is just add these to your sort of like list of chords that you commonly write music with. If you often write music with triads, I suggest you start writing with 7th chords first. If you often write using 7th chords, start using some 9ths. Now, it can just as easily get stale if you only write with 7th chords or only write with 9ths, right? If those are the only sounds you're using, it can also get to be sort of the exact same thing. If you're just using the same chord progressions, but you're adding 7th chords to them or 9ths or whatever, it can also get to just sounding the same all the time. But it can be another way to add color to the melody you're writing. So let's say you mix them all together, triads and 7th chords and 9ths, right? You put them all together. You now have 3 different types of chords, each with their own type of major, minor chords that you can use when you're writing a chord progression. Let's take an example of how we can actually use this in a piece of music, okay? So let's take a chord progression. Let's just do like C major, E minor, F major, G major, and then back to C, right? Something that's not super common, but also not super, super complicated, right? So it's a diatonic chord progression, and let's just add some sevenths to it. So we have C major 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7. Okay, those are our chords. Now let's write a quick sort of outline of some chord tones, something super easy, just whole notes, right? Start with whole notes, okay? Let's hear what that sounds like. Now that we have whole notes, let's add some half notes into it. Let's sort of start to form this into a melody. All right, we've got half notes over our chord progression. Let's see if we can really turn this into a melody, not using any tensions just yet, just with chord tones and sort of passing tones and stuff like that. Okay, we have our melody, sort of. We have an idea for a melody over this chord progression. Let's see if we can make some substitutions. Okay, let's change some of those roots to ninths, and let's change some of those maybe thirds to ninths or fifths to 13th. Let's just try to substitute some of these chord tones so that they don't land on chord tones all the time. Okay, now we have an example of a melody where we substituted some of these tensions out. Let's see if we can just do it one more time, substituting them for different tensions maybe. Another closing idea that you could use when you're using this idea in your own writing is maybe you make an antecedent consequent phrase where you have two different ideas and they have two different substitutions for tensions. You could use the exact same chord progression too if you want to, and it's a sort of another technique or tool that you can use to make melodies and sort of expand them to be. Check out my album Expanding. Always got to plug it every time we say that word, expanding. You can use this to sort of expand your melodic ideas, right? So you think of a 4-bar melody like we just did, right? And then you think, okay, well, let's play the non-tension version first, and then let's play the second time we hear it, let's play it with tensions. Maybe then you have it even a third time if you want to. You could have another version that you substitute for different tensions. But it keeps sort of the material the same and related, but it allows you to repurpose it and reuse it and sort of vary it in a way that will keep it cohesive while also keeping it interesting, so it's not just the same thing over and over again. Okay, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. I hope you learned something about music. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.